Radio Scotland for a Wednesday morning. It's Scott Wilson in for Kaye Adams all this week. We are fielding loads of calls at 0500 92 95 00. Text as well, 80295. A lot of those that I want to get to. We're asking whether you are thinking of getting a grip on your finances. Are you tightening your belt? Possibly thinking of a new car or a new house even. On the latter, I'd like to welcome economist and wealth manager with Jonathan Davis Wealth Management, Jonathan Davis himself. Jonathan, a good time to buy property or not?
A dreadful time to buy property, Scott. The economics are very clear. Unemployment's rising. Interest rates cannot go any lower, so therefore at some point they're going to go up. Debt is easier to find than Osama bin Laden. It's an absolute dreadful time to buy property. Don't touch it for the barge pole for the next 2 or 3 years.
Wow. So if you are a young couple who have saved up what is now a fairly sizable deposit, hoping to buy a house within the next few months or at least within the next year, your advice is don't do it, just continue to rent?
Absolutely. You buy that property and you'll lose your deposit over the next couple of years. What's the point in that?
Wow. I thought it would have been a good time to buy with the prices
Why?
falling. Well, house prices going down. Every time we read an article about it, they've fallen by another 1%, 2%, 2.5%. You would have thought we're now on the bottom rung of the ladder. The only way is up.
We've only started to go down. It's been going down for the last 6 months or so. Since the most recent peak, although, of course, the original peak was the end of 2007. No, the housing market doesn't move in months. It moves in years.
Wow. So the fact that the interest rates are an all-time low, do you think that's giving people a false sense of reality?
I think, to be absolutely frank, I think the media, I think estate agents, I think bankers, I think politicians, mortgage brokers give people a false sense of reality. The reality is that house prices are several times average incomes, and they only got to that stage because until a couple of years ago, we had a debt orgy which lasted for years. There is increasing restriction on lending now, simply because the banks, if you look at it seriously, are effectively all technically insolvent, and that's why the banks are not lending to the same extent that they were. Prices reflect lending. They do not reflect anything else. You know, they talk about there's a lot of demand out there. Well, actually, there isn't. I've been looking at the Chartered Surveyors survey recently, and in Scotland, the Chartered Surveyors themselves paint an overwhelmingly gloomy picture. There are very few buyers around, and even if there are buyers, they haven't got the lending. Therefore, there's no real demand. No. Prices are going to go down for the next couple of years. Just look at public sector employment. When public sector employment goes through the roof, as it is, and it gives me no pleasure to say it, you'll see prices in housing going the other way.
Fascinating. Stay with us, Jonathan. I've got a myriad of questions here which have just come up from your last statement there. I want to, ahead of that, go to Pamela in Dumfries, who's an independent financial advisor. Pamela, I believe you actually going to schools.
Yeah, just to correct you, Scott, I'm actually a financial education officer, and my job is with the local council here. So I'm not tied to any kind of financial organisation or give financial advice myself, but I do teach how to manage your money with school children as early as primary 3.
Now, that's interesting because I have experience with my kids at school some time ago, admittedly, and it was, as Fergus was talking about earlier on, badged people going in from the RBS or the Bank of Scotland. But you're actually employed by the local authority themselves?
Yeah, I've been doing the job for about a year, and all the programme and all the work that I do is drawn up by myself and my department. So, as I say, it's not affiliated to other organisations.
And what's the reaction like from the kids themselves?
The kids I think at the moment what I'm finding is smaller children do actually have an awareness of money much more than I did when I was that age. And what they're doing is trying to piece the bits that they're hearing in conversations at home. So with me going in, it's actually we're looking at things like debit card, credit card, debt, even with primary children. and they're starting to piece together things and get, I think just to get a little bit clarity about what is being talked about at home quite openly, I think, now in front of them.
Tremendous. And what's the reaction been like, particularly with the younger kids?
The younger kids love it. They don't. What I'm finding is they don't know notes. They don't know coins. They're not aware of what colour notes and coins are. They know about credit cards. They know you can borrow. But they think that money grows in trees and haven't any concept of where this money comes if you use a credit card.
Sounds like you've been speaking with my kids, actually. What about the older ones? Obviously, you would approach it from a different angle there, but are you getting lethargy from them, or are they genuinely interested in it?
No, they're genuinely interested. I work anything with sort of S1 up to S6. The S6 scarily just have no concept of what it's going to be like to be leaving home and what money they're going to have and what they're going to have to budget. So we look at budgets and we look at managing their money in that way. And the younger sort of S2, S3, they're still interested, and we look at things like when they start to work and they'll have gross pay and net pay and there'll be tax and things coming off. So we try to look at it from different angles to catch what they're maybe thinking about at that point in their education.
What a fantastic idea. I wonder how prevalent that is throughout the rest of the country. Pamela calling us from Dumfries. You can too, 0500 92 95 00. You can text as well, 80295, or visit our Call Kaye Facebook page and leave your comments there. Specifically, we're asking for tips there on how to save money. Some sensible, some slightly off-the-wall ones, but we'll be covering all of those very shortly. It's 9:58 on a Wednesday. You're listening to BBC Radio Scotland. I'm Scott Wilson. This is Call Kaye. Fergus Muirhead with me, Leslie Campbell with me, and Jonathan Davis as well. Jonathan, you painted a fairly gloomy picture there as far as house buyers or prospective house buyers were concerned. What would happen if I was still young and I was engaged and we had saved up a deposit? You're saying don't buy for the next 2 or 3 years. What should I do with that money? Is it safe to put it into a bank?
It certainly is. I just want to come back to you very quickly. I know we're close to the news. It's a gloomy picture only if you have recently purchased or you've taken out a massive debt. If, however, you haven't purchased, it's a very bright picture. Yes, banks are safe. From the 1st of January, in fact, the government, which means the taxpayer ultimately, will secure deposits up to £85,000 in any banking institution. So, yes, your bank deposit is entirely safe.
That's reassuring, because I thought it was all doom, gloom and despondency there. I've actually written down, ask Jonathan if there's any point in saving at all. We're going to talk a lot more about that. We're talking personal finance this morning here on Call Kaye. Is 2011 going to be a year when your purse fails to see the light of day? You can join in the conversation. There's now room on the switchboard, 0500 92 95 00. Text 80295. G in Kirkintilloch says on the text, community credit unions, they're surely the way ahead, encouraging saving and sensible borrowing. They should be guaranteed development support in each community. Do you concur with that? Also points here about a fixed rate mortgage, looking for advice on that. We'll ask the experts as Call Kaye continues after the latest news to the hour.
92 to 95 FM, 810 medium wave, and on digital. BBC Radio Scotland.
The news at 10 o'clock, I'm Bill Whiteford. Scottish Water says it's dealing with 4 times the normal level of calls from customers because of burst pipes caused by the thaw. Many houses and businesses across Scotland have lost their supplies, with some people having to use bottled water. Myra Boyd from Kilmacombe had to leave her house after 2 burst pipes.
Upstairs, the water was streaming through my bedroom ceiling and in the bathroom. Fortunately, we were able to get someone to help with mending one of the bursts, and then it turned out we'd found the second one in the bathroom. Had we not got them, we would have been left with a freezing cold, wet house, for days on end, because the assessors at the insurance company were off.
And in Northern Ireland, 40,000 people in 80 towns and villages are without water for an 8th day because of burst pipes. Northern Ireland Water has warned the problems could last for several more days yet. Dr Alistair MacDonald, the SDLP MP for South Belfast, said the supplier's response had been shambolic.
Elderly people, young people are very vulnerable because toilets don't work. It's not possible to wash, it's not possible to prepare food, and people are in a third world situation where they're queuing up for water.
A delegation of West African presidents has arrived in Nigeria to brief the current head of the region, Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, about their failure to resolve the political crisis in Ivory Coast. The incumbent Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo has refused to resign, despite being widely viewed as the loser of November's election. The government says it wants to make it easier to give time and money to charity. People could be prompted to make donations when using a cash point or applying for passports and driving licences. Ministers say they want to create a culture of generosity. 2 men have been arrested in connection with a sexual assault which happened in Aberdeen last month. A woman was attacked in Correction Wynd in the city centre on November the 4th. Kevin Keane reports.
The 21-year-old woman was sexually assaulted at about 2:20 in the morning on Thursday, November the 4th. It happened on the tiny Correction Wynd close to the Green. At the time, officers issued a warning to people to consider their personal safety when out under the influence of alcohol. They said women in particular should stick to well-lit areas and stay with others. This morning, Grampian Police has confirmed that 2 men, aged 33 and 39, have been arrested in connection with the assault. They're both due to appear at Aberdeen Sheriff Court later today.
There's a warning that many young people are suffering from sleep disorders due to fears about unemployment. A survey conducted by the Princess Trust suggests as many as 1 in 3 youngsters suffers from insomnia. The charity also found young Scots are facing increased mental health problems such as panic attacks and depression. The UK Border Agency has apologised after an email was sent to customs officers asking them not to search people for drugs over Christmas because of staff shortages. The agency says the email was sent by mistake and it'll be carrying out a review. That's the news now. The sports news, David McDade.
And Hamilton's New Douglas Park has passed a pitch inspection, meaning their game against Aberdeen is on. Kick-offs at 3 o'clock. There's full commentary on Sports Sound 810 medium wave. In the other games this evening, Celtics again have the chance to go top of the league when they host Motherwell. Dundee United play their first game in over 5 weeks against Hibs at Easter Road. Hearts visit St Mirren and Inverness host Kilmarnock. There's also coverage of all those games on Sports Sound. Toronto FC are unhappy. Their player Dwayne De Rosario has gone on trial with Celtic. They say they knew nothing of the Canadian midfielder's trip to Glasgow, adding Celtic should have approached them first. And for the first time in 24 years, the Ashes will remain with England after they beat Australia by an innings and 157 runs in the 4th test in Melbourne this morning. The tourists are now 2-1 up and will win their first series down under in 24 years if they avoid defeat in Sydney next week. That's the sport. Nina has the latest travel.
Thanks, David. In Aberdeenshire, there's flooding on the A90 Fraserburgh to Peterhead Road near to St Fergus. Be prepared for delays as temporary traffic lights are in place. Flooding is also affecting the A90 at Toll of Burness, where police say the road is not advisable. On the M8, there are large potholes in both directions between junction 6 Newhouse and 3 Livingston. And on the M74, surface water is lying around junction 12 Millbank. Train services between Gourock and Glasgow Central are running a reduced service due to signalling problems. 08000 92 95 88. That's the number to call if you spot any problems.
And the forecast, most places dry and cloudy with lingering mist and fog. Patchy light rain will affect the Solway, Galloway Hills, Argyll and Skye at times. The best chance of brighter skies will be across North Aberdeenshire, Murray and the North Highlands. The gradual thaw will continue, temperatures between 3 and 8 with a light southerly breeze. BBC Radio Scotland News.
0500 92 95 00. Text 80295. Call Kaye now.
Except it's not Kaye, it's Scott Wilson sitting in for Kaye for the remainder of the week here on BBC Radio Scotland, and we're talking personal finance this morning. Is 2011 going to be a year when your purse fails to see the light of day, or are you spending like it's going out of fashion ahead of the VAT increase in the new year? Have you any money-saving tips you'd like to share with us? Lots of people have been doing so on our Facebook page. Perhaps you'd like to put your own finance-related question to our experts. With me are Fergus Muirhead, BBC Scotland's financial expert, the Daily Record's investigative financial journalist Leslie Campbell, and economist and wealth manager with Jonathan Davis Wealth Management, Jonathan Davis. You can call us 0500 92 95 00. You can text 80295. Well, will start off this section of the programme by going back to the phone lines. People obviously buying into this financial situation particularly heavily this morning. Thank you very much indeed for your patience on the phone. Derek's in Edinburgh. Derek, a very good morning to you. I believe you've got a problem with your portfolio.
Yes, well, thank you for taking my call, and a very good morning to yourself and your guest speakers.
Thank you.
It's something that happened a few years ago, and it's a little bit embarrassing to talk about it on national radio, but I'd appreciate a comment, at least from one of your speakers. I felt that there was a bad advice given a number of years back with a portfolio, and the whole thing collapsed to the point of almost total loss. I kind of handled it emotionally rather well, I thought, and I just put it out of my head and moved on. And it was something I heard, maybe perhaps as much as a year ago, about investigations can be done into whether or not the person was suitably qualified to give advice. And I wondered, because it's a number of years back, is it too late to set up an inquiry about it?
OK, let me ask Jonathan Davis that question. Jonathan?
My understanding is it's probably not too late. You'd be best to contact a lawyer who is specifically knowledgeable of financial services, and I'm sure you can find them from the Law Society of Scotland website. In essence, you're absolutely correct. First of all, where was the advisor or firm authorised and regulated by the Financial Services Authority? Secondly, as you say, were they qualified, and actually the level of qualification required to give financial advice in the UK is extremely low. You don't have to have much qualifications. And thirdly, and most importantly, and this is what the lawyer will look into, is the written documentation of the advice, is it relevant to what you actually received? In other words, did they say it was a high risk or low risk, and so on and so forth? And ultimately, clearly, unfortunately, it turned out to be extremely high risk, and that's what they'll be checking to see whether or not there is a case to answer.
Can I come in here with another perspective on this?
Yes, of course.
And if actually, I've skipped to the end of what I was going to say. If you want to contact me at the Daily Record, I'll go through the procedure with you. But the other avenue is not to go to a lawyer, first of all, but to go back to the company that sold you the product and tell them what your complaint is. There's a regulatory responsibility that they have to respond. I think it's within 6 weeks to your complaint. They have to investigate it. And then failing that, you can go to the Financial Ombudsman, and the plank, if you like, of your complaint would be that not that they sold you something which ultimately lost you money, but that they did not sell you a suitable product, i.e. you told them that you wanted X and they sold you Y. Yes. Or the same thing applies to the competency of the person who sold it to you. He perhaps didn't understand what you were saying to him, or he didn't understand the product that he was selling you. And I have dealt with people who have, wanted to put their retirement money into a lower risk product, and the advisor has sold them, a kick-out 5-year knockoff plan, something very complicated, constructed with derivatives on the stock market, which ultimately was not what they wanted. And the financial advisor that I've then gone on to and spoken to hadn't understood the product. So yes, certainly you can go to a lawyer, but the other avenue is to go to the company, first of all, and register your complaint in the proper regulatory framework, and then if that doesn't work, to go to the Financial Ombudsman. But if you do write to me at the Record, I'll go through it with you.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. I think just what you've highlighted and what you've so beautifully articulated, I think that's more or less down that road. I do remember very vaguely just saying that it was a low-risk portfolio that one was seeking, and I'm actually totally confused how such a massive loss could have been incurred.
Yeah, well, the figure I brought up earlier on this morning, the head of the Financial Services Authority estimated last month that £500 million a year of finance products are being missold, and that's 250 million of the actual pensions or investments, and then you add on to that the fees and commissions, and it bumps up to 500 a year. So if there's been a dialogue between you and your financial advisor, and you've ended up with something that you didn't want, not that you lost money, because nobody can protect you against buying shares, but if you've got got what you didn't want, then there are very, very well prescribed routes for you to go through the complaints procedure, and I'm happy to take you through that.
Thank you very much.
Derek, thank you very much indeed. I no doubt it took a lot of bottle for you to actually pick up the phone today, but hopefully that's been helpful, and I think there'll be a lot of people listening who are in exactly that position. So thank you very much indeed. I'm going to stay with the calls right now. I'm going to go to Douglas. Douglas, a very good morning. Welcome to the programme.
Good morning.
You have a rebuke, I believe, for Jonathan Davis.
Well, I felt compelled to ring up. I just happened to be listening to the programme while I was driving, and I was just appalled by his negativity and doom and gloom that he put forward. I find it extraordinary, really. That's not what people want to hear at the moment. People want a positivity and some good news. And for this man to spread such doom and gloom and say that the market is absolutely in an appalling mess, and young people, prospective buyers at the moment, should refrain from going and buying their properties and wait at least 2 years or even longer, is an absolute nonsense.
Jonathan Davis, defend yourself.
My advice to young people would be, to would-be house purchasers, is to go out there and buy now, and don't be influenced by the doom and gloom merchants, because it'll be the best long-term investment they can ever make.
Okay.
Money on deposit.
What do you base that? What do you base that? It's a great time to buy.
Well, I think the interest rates have never been lower. Okay, in the next year or two, or perhaps next year, we're told that the interest rates, there are going to be a rise or two to keep present inflation in check.
And what do you think that will do to the market?
Well, can I just expand on that a little bit and say this? I have experience of the previous recession, where, as a businessman, I had a massive overdraft 20 years ago in 1989 to 92. But the base rate then was 15%, for heaven's sake.
Exactly,
15%.
and it came down to 0.5% over the next 15 years. That's what caused the housing boom, and on top of that, we had the biggest debt orgy in history.
No,
is what we have now.
The drop in interest rates to 0.5% was not driven by the inflated housing market. It was driven to boost the economy, and it was the government, or the Labour government, the previous government, who reduced that in vast increments, as you know, down to 0.5%. It happened very quickly to put the brakes on the recession. It wasn't as a result just of the housing market.
Jonathan, let me bring in Fergus there if I can.
Let's look at the future. If interest rates rise and there's not much lending going on and unemployment rise, tell me, how can that be positive for the housing market?
Okay, well, Jonathan, in a sentence.
Well, I think, quite frankly, that things are difficult with the economy, and I quite agree with rising unemployment. That is difficult, but that shouldn't affect those who have some kind of a deposit who want to make a house purchase. And just because there may be further unemployment or high levels of unemployment, that isn't necessarily going to damage and crucify the housing market.
OK, Jonathan, let me stop you there. Let me bring in BBC Scotland's financial expert, Fergus Muirhead.
Just a couple of points from what Douglas and Jonathan have both said. I think, first of all, you can't ask Jonathan to go into a programme and give good news if he believes that the news is bad. I mean, it's completely unfair to ask Jonathan to say things that he doesn't believe in, just so that listeners get a better sense of what he sees as being issues with the property market. And I was quite agreeing with a lot of what Douglas was saying there until he came to the end and talked about how buying a house is the best long-term investment you can make. Part of the issue with the housing boom, and part of the reason that house prices are so over the top at the moment and have been so over the last few years, has got to do with the availability of credit, but it's also got to do with the fact that council houses were allowed to be sold for the first time in the 80s, and that created a whole new generation of people that wanted to buy houses. And it also created the issue that Douglas raised, which is that we shouldn't necessarily be seeing houses as a long-term investment. We should see a house as somewhere to live. We all need somewhere to live, and if buying a house represents a better way of doing that than renting a house, then we should buy a house. But we shouldn't be looking to buy a house to make the £100 that we pay for it, as Leslie said earlier in the programme, turn into £200 overnight. Buying a house is not about making money; it's about having somewhere to live.
I do agree with you on that point, but the fact is that houses or property will rise and
that's not a fact. That's your opinion.
Well, they always have done. They always have done for 100 years.
Because the demographics and the economics have allowed house prices to rise over 30 or 40 years. Everything is reversed. And, sir, you are totally blind to reality.
I'm not blind to reality. I think you are. I think it seems to me that the picture you're painting is that everything is going to crash. Oh, let's just have the housing market crash to absolutely zero. Is that what you want?
I suggest you look at the front page today of the Financial Times, where 50 out of 56 economists expect house prices to crash in 2011. Don't listen to me. Read the 56 economists and the FT.
I've seen and read many headlines in the last 2 or 3 years about the property market crashing. It was front page news on national papers.
With respect, gentlemen, I'm going to draw a line in the sand here. It's a bit like Fergus is getting ready to hold your jackets. We're all going to chant fight, fight, fight. So I'd love to hear more, but unfortunately we've got a switchboard full of calls. I've got pages of texts here. Jill on the text, Fergus, reiterating what you say. It's time people began to accept that their home is a place to live and not a source of cash. She says, by the way, from the 60s, managing money was taught in home economics. Your advisor says we should all be forced to pay into a pension. Don't we already do that with the state pension?
Well, we do to a certain extent with the national insurance contributions that we make, and that's an interesting one actually, because it used to be the case that that national insurance and tax were two completely separate things, and that tax paid for the running of the country, and national insurance paid for the National Health Service and our pension provision. Now it all gets lumped into this one great big thing. We do pay through national insurance for the state pension, and some people pay slightly more for an additional state pension, but we don't pay enough for our retirement, and we don't start early enough. And if people are not going to do it voluntarily, then somewhere down the line the government needs to take a step that says we're going to make people pay more into their pension, whether we call that higher national insurance contributions or higher tax or a separate thing called a pension along the lines of the Dutch model that somebody mentioned earlier on. I don't really mind, but somewhere down the line we need to understand that we're not saving enough for retirement just now.
I've got so many questions that I want to put to you guys. It's very rare, out with the confines of a pub usually, where you get an expert on financial matters. I've got so many things to do, and we've only got 12 minutes left of the programme. I've also got a full switchboard of calls here I want to get through, but a number of interesting texts here. When I was at school in the 60s, the TSB came round every Friday, and every child had a bank book and would pay into their account. When you left school, you had a bank account, deposit and some savings, which is a lesson that has stayed with me all my life, says Peter in Aberdeen. A lot of people sympathising with those sentiments, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. Another one here. I was in heavy credit card debt and spent many years paying it off. I now have a pay-as-you-go credit card, says Vic in Plockton. Best thing ever. What's a pay-as-you-go credit card?
Well, effectively it's a card that you load up with money. So it's not a credit card at all as such. It's a card that you put some money onto and you spend it until it's done. It's like taking money out of a bank account via debit card in some ways that you can only take out money that's actually there.
Really good idea. Let me go to the phone lines again. Diana is in the Dean Village in Edinburgh. Diana, very good morning. Welcome to Call Kaye. I believe you've got a small pension.
That's right, I do. I'm coming up for 70, and about 8 years ago, I went to a financial advisor, and he transferred it into a cash pension fund, and advised me to wait until I was 75 until I drew any money from it. And I'm just wondering why that is.
Okay, let me put that one to Jonathan.
I imagine it was because at the time the rules were that by the time you got to age 75, you would be forced by the pensions rules to exchange the pension fund for a lifetime annuity. In other words, an income until you're no longer with us. And I would say to you that between 70 and 75, actuarially, studies have shown that it's probably the optimal time to indeed exchange the pension fund for an annuity. You need to seek independent financial advice, someone who is expert in the annuity field, who will be able to explain to you the pros and cons of keeping it as it is or exchanging it for an annuity, and you can get different types of annuity.
Thank you. And if I do go to an independent financial advisor, obviously he will get a commission. Does that mean that reduces my pension fund?
If there is a commission, then it will slightly, I would suggest to you, reduce the fund. You can, of course, pay him a fee, in which case the fund would not be reduced.
Thank you very much for that.
Very welcome, Dana. Lovely to hear from you. Thank you. Back on to the texts again, and I think you should be promoting credit unions, says this one. No name on it, unfortunately. It's a huge movement. Battlefield Primary in Glasgow runs one, as do many local communities. There's a school local to me, actually. The James Young High School in Livingston run one. Another one, Maggie Farrell says, could schools not set up credit unions? My dad recently had appalling anxiety following a tax bill for over £4,000. He's 85 and still has to complete a self-assessment tax return. He receives state pension and works pension. He finds the whole process really stressful because he has so many direct debits for charities, 33 of them. Bless you, and has gift aid to calculate. He receives attendance allowance from a mum. He's written for years asking, could he stop completing this because it's so stressful? I don't know what he can do. There aren't many organisations who help older people with income tax problems. Experts, who can help with that one? Why is he still having to complete a tax return at 85?
The HMRC, the Revenue and Customs, generally are not too bothered about self-assessment where an individual is a basic rate taxpayer or where there are no complications. If the gentleman is a higher rate taxpayer or indeed is claiming tax reliefs above the norm, then a self-assessment would be required. I suggest he speaks to his local tax office and asks them directly, does he need to continue doing this?
Good, thank you. Good advice. Can anyone on the panel tell me, this is Anne here, whether or not the VAT we're charged on gas and electricity at 6% at present will remain at this rate when general VAT goes to 20%?
It's certainly not going up to 20%.
Oh, right. I thought you were going to elaborate on that, but clearly not. OK, thank you very much indeed. Let's take another telephone call here. Let's go to Airdrie. Archibald, you are talking about insurance. Your house burned down some time ago, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. My house burned down about 6 years ago, and I've been staying in a caravan ever since, with all the frozen pipes and everything else. I've been to the Ombudsman. Took him 2 years to try and do something for me, and he was very helpful, but got absolutely nowhere. Mr. John Reid, the MP, tried very hard and didn't get anywhere with them either. Sunday Mail tried. I've managed to get legal aid to try and fight the story, and it's just absolutely unbelievable the trials and tribulations I've gone through because of this. The company, I don't know if I can mention their name or not, they call them Payment Shield, have just refused point blank they've made an offer which is just absolutely ridiculous. And I'm just at my wit's end with it, really, to be honest.
Leslie Campbell, can I bring you in here as an investigative financial journalist? Is this, unusual?
Well, it seems as if some of the biggest guns have had a go at this. I can't offer you any advice that you haven't been given already, but I would be quite interested to know how they managed to wriggle out of it, if for no other reason than to warn other people they may be in a similar situation. I'm not trying to profit from your grief, but I would like to know just to protect other people who think they are covered.
Yes, well, I mean, I had a small farm here, and I've tried very hard to run it, and I've had to sell it because they will not pay up.
But on what grounds are they refusing to pay?
There's a whole load of grounds they're refusing to pay, but really, to be honest with you, it's a case of if they can think up an excuse to use it.
Yes,
They refused to pay my hotel bill. They put me up in a hotel for 6 weeks, and they refused to pay that. It's just unbelievable. As I say, this has been going on for 6 years, and I could write a book on it.
Yeah.
But the basics of it is really what I've given you on the phone just now. But I think they're needing to do something to force fair treatment of people like me. The financial ombudsman is trying hard, but he can't do it. He can only adjudicate up to 100,000. Mm-hmm. The FSA have done nothing. They can do nothing to help me either. The only person that has really been able to help me is my solicitor in Glasgow, and he's having a hard time of it because their solicitors are coming up with all other kinds of reasons now why it shouldn't be getting paid out. It's just atrocious the way I'm being treated.
You must be at your wit's end, Archie.
Absolutely. But I've had this for 6 years. I live on my own. I am not giving up.
Good on you.
Under no circumstances am I giving up with this. To the day I die, I'll fight this, because what about if I was an old a lady, a pensioner? I'm a pensioner, of course, disabled pensioner at that. But even if anyone else who couldn't fight it, didn't have the stamina to do it, They're getting away with murder. It's ridiculous.
Remarkable.
Well, Archie, if you write to me at the record, I may not be able to get any solution for you, but at least I can publish their name and warn other customers and other policyholders that they might be similarly vulnerable.
Yes, that would be a way to hurt them. That's or to warn other people of the circumstances.
Yeah, I'll have a go.
I'm not a vindictive person, but they have cost me my life. I've had 6 years of living in circumstances with no toilet, no water facilities. Nothing here at all. Everything I've had to do on my own.
That's horrendous. Archie, thank you very much indeed for your call. I really appreciate that. Leslie, I look forward to reading about that one.
Yep, I'll follow it up.
I'd like to bring in Robert from Mulgai here because Jonathan Davis took a bit of a beating on a previous call. Robert, you're in Jonathan's court, I believe.
Absolutely. He's totally right. The other guy was totally wrong. Property will drop dramatically by 20% at least in the next 2 to 3 years. So,
what's your basis for that assumption, Robert?
Well, I worked for the FSA for 15 years. I've dealt with insurance companies. I know what value they give to the public, which is pretty limited. And I know pensions, for instance, are the main plank of savings. But if I was head of the FSA, I wouldn't really allow any insurance company to manage any more investment funds at all. And we'd have proper pension boutiques should be set up to solely manage these at far less cost to the public, and they get far better value. There's so many hidden charges in pension funds, it's still, after 15 years, impossible to really ascertain what these charges all are.
Robert, thank you for that. Jonathan, you'll be feeling a whole lot better now. I'm being flippant.
On shares, on gold, on property, whatever, for years. And you know, everyone's got an opinion. All I can say is I restate the facts. There's very little lending going on, and there won't be much lending for years for very technical, specific reasons. The interest rates over the next several years are going to rise. Unemployment is rising. The UK PLC, UK government, is effectively bankrupt. That's for another day. In other words, the housing market is going down. The economics are clear as far as I'm concerned.
Good. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let me just squeeze in some comments from our Call Kaye Facebook page. The question there, give us some of your money-saving tips. Jackie says, I was on sick pay, and when I did get back to work, the weather stopped me, so that was more loss of money. So some of the family and friends did miss out on Christmas presents this year. They understood because they love me. Oh, bless. Gordon Scott Davidson, our best money-saving tip is the one everybody knows and chooses to ignore. Stop smoking. When we discovered that smoking 40 cigs a day worked out at £70 a week, £280 a month, we stopped, and it's amazing how the money soon piles up and we can enjoy life without the perpetual too much month at the end of the money. I think we've all experienced that. I know that it's not easy, but in the end it is worth it. I didn't leave the house. Best way to save is not to spend. Good telly, ET chicken run, etc. It's a holiday and shopping is hard work, so step away from the shops, go for a run on the beach and feel better, you porkers, quote unquote, says Max Blinkhorn. And Graham Duffy says, judging by the pile of credit card receipts, it's probably a safe bet to say, yes, I overspent this Christmas, but hey, it's only money. A good money-saving tip is spend less than you earn, or take a metaphorical leaf out of Ray Mears' book, How to Survive on Tree Bark. And eat that. Maybe a bit extreme, but a good suggestion nonetheless. Thank you all very much indeed. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the texts. We did manage to get through all the calls, I'm delighted to say. My thanks to BBC Scotland's financial expert Fergus Muirhead, to the Daily Record's Leslie Campbell, and to Jonathan Davis from Jonathan Davis at Wealth Management. But thank you most importantly to all of you, whether you've contributed or just listened. Thank you very much indeed. I'm back tomorrow when we're going to be talking about health. But now to the healthiest man in Pacific Quay here in Glasgow. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Fred McCoy.
I wish,
you were once.
Scott.
You were once.
Well, I'm working at it again. You catch me just here unwrapping the skin from a satsuma.
I haven't eaten a scone.
I didn't know about this. Scott, you still there?
Satsuma and a scone.
Listen, what is the problem that you've got about your iPad? Because Gary Marshall's coming in. I want to get you sorted out.
Tremendous. Well, I got it for Christmas, and I have a MacBook Pro, and I thought the easiest thing to do, just plug it into the MacBook and it charges. But it comes up and it says not charging, and I'd like to know why. Because everybody else is charging me at this time of year.
Keep listening.
Here all week. Thank you very much.
Try the fish. Have a good one, Scott.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Speak to you tomorrow. This is Macaulay & Co. It's Wednesday the 29th of December.